In monotheism, God is conceived of as the supreme being and principal object of faith. The concept of God as described by most theologians includes the attributes of omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, divine simplicity, and as having an eternal and necessary existence. Many theologians also describe God as being omnibenevolent and all-loving. God is most often held to be non-corporeal and to be without any human biological sex. Yet the concept of God actively creating the universe has caused many religions to describe God using masculine terminology, using such terms as him or father. Furthermore, some religions attribute only a purely grammatical gender to God. In theism, God is the creator and sustainer of the universe, while in deism, God is the creator, but not the sustainer of the universe. In pantheism, God is the universe itself. In atheism, God is not believed to exist, while God is deemed unknown or unknowable within the context of agnosticism. God has also been conceived as being incorporeal, a personal being, the source of all moral obligation, and the greatest conceivable existent. Many notable philosophers have developed arguments for and against the existence of God. There are many names for God, and different names are attached to different cultural ideas about God's identity and attributes. In the ancient Egyptian era of Atonism, possibly the earliest recorded monotheistic religion, this deity was called Aten, premised on being the one true, supreme being and creator of the universe. In the Hebrew Bible and Judaism, he who is I am that I am, and the Tetragrammaton YHWH are used as names of God, while Yahweh and Jehovah are sometimes used in Christianity as vocalizations of YHWH. In the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, God, consubstantial in three persons, is called the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In Judaism, it is common to refer to God by the titular names Elohim or Adonai, the latter of which is believed by some scholars to descend from the Egyptian Aten. In Islam, the name Allah, Al-El, or Al-Elah is used, while Muslims also have a multitude of titular names for God. In Hinduism, Brahman is often considered a monistic deity. Other religions have names for God. For instance, Baha in the Baha'i faith, Waheguru in Sikhism, and Ahura Mazda in Zoroastrianism. The many different conceptions of God, and competing claims as to God's characteristics, aims, and actions, have led to the development of ideas of omnitheism, pantheism, or a perennial philosophy, which postulates that there is one underlying theological truth, of which all religions express a partial understanding, and as to which the devout in the various great world religions are in fact worshipping that one God, but through different, overlapping concepts or mental images of Him. Etymology in usage. The earliest written form of the Germanic word God comes from the 6th century Christian Codex Argenteus. The English word itself is derived from the Proto-Germanic *ULAN. The reconstructed Proto-Indo-European from *GHU to M was likely based on the root *gau, which meant either to call or to invoke. The Germanic words for God were originally neuter, applying to both genders, but during the process of the Christianization of the Germanic peoples, for their indigenous Germanic paganism, the words became a masculine syntactic form. In the English language, the capitalized form of God continues to represent a distinction between monotheistic God and gods. In polytheism, the English word God and its counterparts in other languages are normally used for any and all conceptions, and, in spite of significant differences between religions, the term remains an English translation common to all. The same holds for Hebrew El, but in Judaism, Judaism, God is also given a proper name, the Tetragrammaton YHWH, in origin possibly the name of an Edomite or Midianite deity, Yahweh. In many translations of the Bible, when the word Lord is in all capitals, it signifies that the word represents the Tetragrammaton. Allah is the Arabic term with no plural used by Muslims and Arabic-speaking Christians and Jews, meaning the God, while Ilah is the term used for a deity or a god in general. God may also be given a proper name in monotheistic currents of Hinduism, which emphasize the personal nature of God, with early references to his name as Krishna Vasudeva in Bhagavata, later Vishnu and Hari. Ahura Mazda is the name for God used in Zoroastrianism. Mazda, or rather the Avestan stem for Mazda, nominative Mazda, reflects Proto-Iranian * Mazda. It is generally taken to be the proper name of the spirit, and like its Sanskrit cognate Meda, means intelligence or wisdom. Both the Avestan and Sanskrit words reflect Proto-Indo-Iranian * Mazda, from Proto-Indo-European Minnesota SDA 1, literally meaning placing one's mind, hence wise. Waheguru is a term most often used in Sikhism to refer to God. It means wonderful teacher in the Punjabi language. Vahi means wonderful, and Guru is a term denoting teacher. Waheguru is also described by some as an experience of ecstasy which is beyond all descriptions. The most common usage of the word Waheguru is in the greeting Sikhs use with each other: Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fatah. Wonderful Lord's Khalsa, victory is to the wonderful Lord. Baha, the greatest name for God in the Baha'i faith, is Arabic for all glorious. General conceptions. There is no clear consensus on the nature or even the existence of God. The Abrahamic conceptions of God include the monotheistic definition of God in Judaism, the Trinitarian view of Christians, and the Islamic concept of God. The Dharmic religions differ in the view of the divine. Views of God in Hinduism vary by region, sect, and caste, ranging from monotheistic to polytheistic. Divinity was recognized by the historical Buddha, particularly Akra and Brahma. However, other sentient beings, including gods, can at best only play a supportive role in one's personal path to salvation. Conceptions of God in the latter developments of the Mahayana tradition give a more prominent place to notions of the divine. Oneness monotheists hold that there is only one God, and may claim that the one true God is worshipped in different religions under different names. The view that all theists actually worship the same God, whether they know it or not, is especially emphasized in Hinduism and Sikhism. In Christianity, the doctrine of the Trinity describes God as one God in three persons. The Trinity comprises the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Islam's most fundamental concept is Tawhid. God is described in the Quran as, say, He is Allah, the one and only, Allah, the eternal, absolute. He begetteth not, nor is He begotten, and there is none like unto Him. Muslims repudiate the Christian doctrine of the Trinity and the divinity of Jesus, comparing it to polytheism. In Islam, God is beyond all comprehension or equal and does not resemble any of His creations in any way. Thus, Muslims are not iconoclasts, and are not expected to visualize God. Henotheism is the belief and worship of a single God while accepting the existence or possible existence of other deities. Theism, deism and pantheism. Theism generally holds that God exists realistically, objectively, and independently of human thought, that God created and sustains everything, that God is omnipotent and eternal, and that God is personal and interacting with the universe through, for example, religious experience and the prayers of humans. Theism holds that God is both transcendent and immanent. Thus, God is simultaneously in definite and in some way present in the affairs of the world. Not all theists subscribe to all of these propositions, but each usually subscribes to some of them. Catholic theology holds that God is infinitely simple and is not involuntarily subject to time. Most theists hold that God is omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent. Although this belief raises questions about God's responsibility for evil and suffering in the world, some theists ascribe to God a self-conscious or purposeful limiting of omnipotence, omniscience, or benevolence. Open theism, by contrast, asserts that, due to the nature of time, God's omniscience does not mean the deity can predict the future. Theism is sometimes used to refer in general to any belief in a god or gods, i.e. monotheism or polytheism. Deism holds that God is wholly transcendent. God exists but does not intervene in the world beyond what was necessary to create it. In this view, God is not anthropomorphic, and neither answers prayers nor produces miracles. Common in deism is a belief that God has no interest in humanity and may not even be aware of humanity. Pandeism and panentheism, respectively, combine deism with the pantheistic or panentheistic beliefs. Pandeism is proposed to explain as to deism why God would create a universe and then abandon it, and as to pantheism, the origin and purpose of the universe. Pantheism holds that God is the universe and the universe is God, whereas panentheism holds that God contains, but is not identical to, the universe. It is also the view of the liberal Catholic Church theosophy. Some views of Hinduism accept Vaishnavism, which believes in panentheism, Sikhism, some divisions of neo-paganism and Taoism, along with many varying denominations and individuals within denominations. Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, paints a pantheistic, panentheistic view of God, which has wide acceptance in Hasidic Judaism, particularly from the founder the Baal Shem Tov, but only as an addition to the Jewish view of a personal God, not in the original pantheistic sense that denies or limits persona to God. Other concepts. Dystheism, which is related to theodicy, is a form of theism which holds that God is either not wholly good or is fully malevolent as a consequence of the problem of evil. One such example comes from Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, in which Ivan Karamazov rejects God on the grounds that he allows children to suffer. In modern times, some more abstract concepts have been developed, such as process theology and open theism. The contemporaneous French philosopher Michel Henry has, however, proposed a phenomenological approach and definition of God as phenomenological, essence of life. God has also been conceived as being incorporeal, a personal being, the source of all moral obligation, and the greatest conceivable existent. These attributes were all supported to varying degrees by the early Jewish, Christian and Muslim theologian philosophies, including Maimonides, Augustine of Hippo, and Al-Ghazali, respectively. Non-theistic views. Non-theist views about God also vary. Some non-theists avoid the concept of God, whilst accepting that it is significant to many. Other non-theists understand God as a symbol of human values and aspirations. The 19th-century English atheist Charles Bradlaugh declared that he refused to say, "There is no God," because the word God is to me a sound conveying no clear or distinct affirmation. He said more specifically that he disbelieved in the Christian God. Stephen Jay Gould proposed an approach dividing the world of philosophy into what he called non-overlapping magisteria. In this view, questions of the supernatural, such as those relating to the existence and nature of God, are non-empirical and of the proper domain of theology. The methods of science should then be used to answer any empirical question about the natural world, and theology should be used to answer questions about ultimate meaning and moral value. In this view, the perceived lack of any empirical footprint from the magisterium of the supernatural onto natural events makes science the sole player in the natural world. Another view, advanced by Richard Dawkins, is that the existence of God is an empirical question, on the grounds that a universe with a God would be a completely different kind of universe from one without, and it would be a scientific difference. Carl Sagan argued that the doctrine of a creator of the universe was difficult to prove or disprove, and that the only conceivable scientific discovery that could disprove the existence of a creator would be the discovery that the universe is infinitely old. Stephen Hawking and co-author Leonard M. Lodovico state in the book, The Grand Design, that it is reasonable to ask what created the universe. But if the answer is God, then the question has merely been deflected to that of who created God. Both authors claim, however, that it is possible to answer these questions purely within the realm of science, and without invoking any divine beings. Neuroscientist Michael Nicolasius has proposed that questions of the existence of God are no different from questions of natural sciences. Following a biological comparative approach, he concludes that it is highly probable that God exists, and, although not visible, it is possible that we know some of his attributes. Agnosticism and atheism. Agnosticism is the view that the truth values of certain claims, especially metaphysical and religious claims such as whether God, the divine or the supernatural exists, are unknown and perhaps unknowable. Atheism is, in a broad sense, the rejection of belief in the existence of deities, or a God. In a narrower sense, atheism is specifically the position that there are no deities. Anthropomorphism. Pascal Boyer argues that while there is a wide array of supernatural concepts found around the world, in general, supernatural beings tend to behave much like people. The construction of gods and spirits like persons is one of the best-known traits of religion. He cites examples from Greek mythology, which is, in his opinion, more like a modern soap opera than other religious systems. Bertrand du Castel and Timothy Jurgensen demonstrate through formalization that Boyer's explanatory model matches physics epistemology in positing not directly observable entities as intermediaries. Anthropologist Stuart Guthrie contends that people project human features onto non-human aspects of the world because it makes those aspects more familiar. Sigmund Freud also suggested that God concepts are projections of one's father. Likewise, Emil Durkheim was one of the earliest to suggest that gods represent an extension of human social life to include supernatural beings. In line with this reasoning, psychologist Matt Rossano contends that when humans began living in larger groups, they may have created gods as a means of enforcing morality. In small groups, morality can be enforced by social forces such as gossip or reputation. However, it is much harder to enforce morality using social forces in much larger groups. Rossano indicates that by including ever-watchful gods and spirits, humans discovered an effective strategy for restraining selfishness and building more cooperative groups. Existence. Arguments about the existence of God typically include empirical, deductive, and inductive types. Different views include that God does not exist, God almost certainly does not exist, no one knows whether God exists. God exists, but this cannot be proven or disproven, and that God exists and this can be proven. There are numerous variations on these positions. Countless arguments have been proposed to prove the existence of God. Some of the most notable arguments of the 5 ways of Aquinas, the argument from desire proposed by C.S. Lewis, and the ontological argument formulated both by St. Anselm and René Descartes. St. Anselm's approach was to define God as that than which nothing greater can be conceived. Famed pantheist philosopher Baruch Spinoza would later carry this idea to its extreme. By God I understand a being absolutely infinite, i.e. a substance consisting of infinite attributes, of which each one expresses an eternal and infinite excellence. For Spinoza, the whole of the natural universe is made of one substance, God, or its equivalent, nature. His proof for the existence of God was a variation of the ontological argument. Scientist Isaac Newton saw God as the masterful creator whose existence could not be denied in the face of the grandeur of all creation. Nevertheless, he rejected polymath Leibniz's thesis that God would necessarily make a perfect world which requires no intervention from the Creator. In Query 31 of the Optics, Newton simultaneously made an argument from design and for the necessity of intervention. For while comets move in very eccentric orbs in all manner of positions, blind fate could never make all the planets move one and the same way in orbs concentric. Some inconsiderable irregularities accepted which may have arisen from the mutual actions of comets and planets on one another, and which will be apt to increase, till this system wants a reformation. St. Thomas believed that the existence of God is self-evident in itself, but not to us. Therefore why say that this proposition, God exists of itself, is self-evident, for the predicate is the same as the subject. Now because we do not know the essence of God, the proposition is not self-evident to us, but needs to be demonstrated by things that are more known to us, though less known in the nature, namely, by effects. St. Thomas believed that the existence of God can be demonstrated, briefly in the Summa Theologiae and more extensively in the Summa Contra Gentiles. He considered in great detail 5 arguments for the existence of God, widely known as the Quinquevi. Motion. Some things undoubtedly move, though cannot cause their own motion. Since there can be no infinite chain of causes of motion, there must be a first mover not moved by anything else, and this is what everyone understands by God. Causation. As in the case of motion, nothing can cause itself, and an infinite chain of causation is impossible, so there must be a first cause, called God. Existence of necessarily and the unnecessary. Our experience includes things certainly existing but apparently unnecessary. Not everything can be unnecessary, for then once there was nothing and there would still be nothing. Therefore, we are compelled to suppose something that exists necessarily, having this necessity only from itself, in fact itself the cause for other things to exist. Gradation. If we can notice a gradation in things in the sense that some things are more hot, good, etc., there must be a superlative that is the truest and noblest thing, and so most fully existing. This then, we call God. Ordered tendencies of nature. A direction of actions to an end is noticed in all bodies following natural laws. Anything without awareness tends to a goal under the guidance of one who is aware. This we call God. Some theologians, such as the scientist and theologian A.E. McGrath, argue that the existence of God is not a question that can be answered using the scientific method. Agnostic Stephen Jay Gould argues that science and religion are not in conflict and do not overlap. Some findings in the fields of cosmology, evolutionary biology and neuroscience are interpreted by some atheists as evidence that God is an imaginary entity only, with no basis in reality. These atheists claim that a single, omniscient God who is imagined to have created the universe and is particularly attentive to the lives of humans has been imagined, embellished and promulgated in a transgenerational manner. Richard Dawkins interprets such findings not only as a lack of evidence for the material existence of such a God, but as extensive evidence to the contrary. However, his views are opposed by some theologians and scientists, including Alistair McGrath, who argues that existence of God is compatible with science. Neuroscientist Michael Nicolasius has proposed that questions of the existence of God are no different from questions of natural sciences. Following a biological comparative approach, he concludes that it is highly probable that God exists, and, although not visible, it is possible that we know some of his attributes.